Hey, how's it going, guys? Jack and Matt here with the Toasty Bros, and today we're going to be doing a $250 used market gaming PC because it's been a while.
It has been a while, and this one does deliver some good value for money. But before we get into this PC build, let's hear a word from today's sponsor, Lexar.
Lexar is your one-stop shop for all of your storage needs, from cameras to computers to things that we use every day, and we want the absolute fastest and greatest in value and performance. We go with Lexar.
Stay tuned till later in today's video to learn more about a storage drive that Lexar has to offer. Special thanks again to Lexar for sponsoring today's video. Now let's go ahead and talk about this PC and why is it so cheap? It's so cheap!
So what we have here, and you're probably wondering, why is this board so ugly? This is a Dell Optiplex board that's for 2nd gen. It's LGA 1155, and this one actually has a Xeon in it. This is an Intel Xeon E3-1230, which is a 4-core 8-thread. It's basically on par with like the 2nd gen i7, just without integrated graphics. And oddly enough, this motherboard also came with 4 gigs of RAM, which we had no clue, but this was a really good deal in this $250 gaming PC. And it came with an I/O shield, which is very essential so that you don't have a big hole in the back. We also opted just to buy a pretty nice looking stock Intel cooler because this is a screw-in style one. This is not the one that just clips in, so we figured we'd just go ahead and spend an extra $5 and get the screw-in one. Plus this one has a very thick heatsink. These are actually pretty good. And on top of that, probably the most important part, it uses a proprietary connector. This is not your standard 4-pin, which you can buy adapters and you can make these work technically because, as you can see, it only has 4 cables, but enough modding. We're done with the modding right now, at least. And also, because we didn't think this came with RAM, we bought an 8 gig kit. So it's 2 4 gig sticks and it's DDR3. And so we're basically going to be able to pair this with the 4 gigs to have 12 gigs of RAM because this is also Micron/Crucial RAM. And as long as it's the same speed, then we shouldn't have any errors or problems.
All right, now, these used parts builds, we go really cheap on the graphics card, and this one right here is actually gonna be a pretty good value option. This is a Sapphire RX 470. Now, doing some benchmarks online, the 470 is not a lot worse compared to something like the 570, but on the used market, the 570 ends up going for like $30 to $40 more expensive. Now, this one is, well, kind of a compromised version of a 470 because, well, it was obviously in a mining rig. It does have some rust wherever it was. I did test it when it did show up, and it does work, but it also only comes with 1 display out. So there are some limitations. It's a $250 build here, but if you want to spend a little bit more money, maybe you can get a legit 570 and probably get more performance and better I/O. But again, the whole challenge was to stick this around $250, and this graphics card is what made that happen. And even though this build is $250, we went with an SSD because we want really fast read and write speeds, be able to launch Windows in really quickly, launch our games. 256 gigabytes is enough to get you up and running. Is it gonna be great for Warzone? Probably not, but it's gonna be good enough to get you up and running to play most games. You could slap in a really cheap hard drive if you want mass storage for another 10 or 15 bucks, but for the sake of getting this build up and running, that I've said 1,000 times, this is a good SSD. Now look at this, Thermaltake Smart. I mean, really, on Amazon, this is one of the best options. If you wanted to go the Newegg route, which we'll leave links in the description down below to both Amazon and Newegg to help you guys out, you could go with something like a Montech power supply around the same price point, but 430 watts is more than enough for this PC build, and these Thermaltake power supplies have been really reliable for us, and we've had no issues with them. And lastly, but certainly not least, the case. Of course, you can go with something really, really cheap, but this case, in my opinion, the Matrix 30 from Deepcool is like the borderline as low as I would go in terms of cheap cases while not making too many major sacrifices. It does come with tempered glass, believe it or not, and it does have room for some fans up front, which we're probably gonna install another one up front just for airflow and then slap in an RGB strip to make it look nice, which those are normally like a few bucks here or there on eBay. But this case is our go-to budget case. Is it the best? No, but it does the job, and for $250, I think we're gonna have a lot of performance under the hood. So how about we not waste any more time and put this thing together?
Alright guys, now that we have this $250 gaming PC all put together, let's talk about some benchmarks real quick, shall we? Now this PC is, well, $250, so you have to kind of lower your expectations to understand that this computer is really cheap, but that does not mean this computer cannot get up and perform in a lot of today's latest titles. Now the games we decided to test were more focused around a really cheap PC. We did test a couple of titles that did push it to its limits, but this PC is mainly created to play games like Valorant, CSGO, Fortnite, any sort of esports title, and maybe stretch into games like Warzone on lower settings. First up, with a game like Valorant, we get well over 100 plus FPS on high settings, which is to be expected. Valorant's a really easy game to run. It can run on an APU if you want to, so if you wanted to go the new route and have a better upgrade path and spend close to the same price, maybe $300, $350, you could go that route if Valorant is the main game you want to play. But if you're somebody who's going to be playing anything other than Valorant and wants that dedicated graphics card, this $250 build is a great option for that. In theory, with this, you could actually get a high refresh rate monitor for Valorant, which is kind of weird for a $250 PC, considering you're probably going to spend close to the cost of the computer to get a decent high refresh rate monitor. Probably wouldn't recommend that, but you do have the option to do so if you really wanted to. The next game we tested was Doom Eternal, and on medium settings we got over 60 FPS, which is to be expected. This was a great way to showcase Vulkan, the API that allows older hardware to basically stretch its legs and get way more performance than it normally does on a basic API, and Doom Eternal is a great example of a really good looking game that can run on this $250 computer. This hardware configuration of an RX 470 and the E3 1230 Xeon is actually really well balanced. There's no major bottlenecking in most games tested. In some games, the GPU is the bottleneck, which is a good sign because that means that the CPU is not holding it back and you could easily use a better graphics card if you wanted to, but in this sort of configuration, using some off-the-shelf used parts for $250, it's pretty well balanced. The next game we tested was another one of those esports titles, and that is Rainbow Six Siege. Rainbow Six Siege, again, is a relatively easy game to run, but again, this PC is $250. We have built PCs new for around $400 that don't even come close to the performance that this $250 PC delivers. Yes, this PC uses used parts, and there is an inherent risk with buying used parts, but as long as you do some due diligence in deal hunting and make sure everything works when you get it and get your money back if things don't, then you should be well off and having a really good gaming experience for $250. And the last game we tested, which is a game I know a lot of you out there are probably wondering, is Fortnite. And on Pro settings 1080p, we got over 60 FPS. Is this going to be great for high refresh rate, 100 plus FPS at $250? Not really. Most of the time you are hovering around 60 to 90-ish FPS with a few dips here and there. Fortnite is very CPU dependent when you're running on Pro settings, so if you have a lower end CPU, which in our case we do have a little bit of a lower end CPU, you're going to get some stuttering here and there. Is it very playable? Oh yeah, most definitely, no problems whatsoever, but it is something to keep in mind if you're going to play Fortnite. You may have a few hiccups here and there. So overall, for a $250 PC, I cannot complain. Yes, the used market is kind of hard, and it might be a little bit difficult for you to find the exact pricing that we did here, but we make these videos as general guides so you guys can go out there and try to find the best possible deals that you can on PC hardware that we get. Yes, it takes some patience to buy on the used market. Don't expect to go in the comment section down below and complain that this PC costs way more than it actually does, because it takes a little while, it takes a little patience, and you have to look around on eBay or local markets and get the best deals. You may end up spending more money than us, or you might actually spend less money than us depending on your region. That's the beauty of the used market, and you just have to be really patient if you want to get the best possible deals. So that pretty much wraps up the benchmarking section of today's video. How about we go ahead and bring Jackson back in here to wrap this video up real quick. Thanks again to Lexar for sponsoring today's video. Are you looking to elevate your PC's performance with faster speed and more reliability? Then check out the Lexar NM610 M.2 NVMe SSD. This PCIe Gen 3 NVMe SSD is built with the latest 3D NAND flash and offers transfer speeds up to 2100 megabytes per second read and 1600 megabytes per second write. This SSD also comes in 250 gigabyte, 500 gigabyte, and 1 terabyte capacity options. So if you're looking to upgrade your old NVMe drive or increase your storage capacity, be sure to check out the Lexar NM610 NVMe SSD and get the performance and reliability you need.
So as you guys could tell, in 2020 even, this $250 gaming PC does in fact game. Now obviously for 250 bucks, you really can't expect much, but if you tried to go all new parts for 250, the best you're gonna do is something like a Ryzen 3200G, which is not going to perform as well as this out of the box.
Of course, new parts will give you an upgrade path, and we normally recommend that route if you can't spend a little bit more money, but it's always fun sometimes to dive into these used parts builds and see what kind of value you can get, especially if you're on a really tight budget. And we're actually gonna be taking this PC right after we finish this video and putting it in a full setup so you guys can see what a full budget setup for $500 looks like. And we've built $500 PCs on the channel sometimes, but you can get an actual full setup for 500 bucks. I think you're gonna be really impressed with that as well.
So the links in the description are affiliate links, and they do help us out a lot if you want to purchase any of the parts. Don't forget to check out our other 2 YouTube channels and also our twitch.tv/toastybros. Do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
And we'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.
Goodbye, English.
Goodbye. Adios.
Konnichiwa.
Konnichiwa!